The grey janitor's uniform hit the polished wooden table with a sharp thud, the sound cutting through the glass-walled conference room on the 48th floor, a place where power was once decided by signatures, but now began with humiliation. Marcus Robert Whitman's voice was cold as steel, each word dragged out with precision. "This probably suits you better than those $1,000 suits your father bought you." He pushed the uniform across the table toward the man sitting at the far end, his eyes filled with contempt. Laughter cracked around the room, 8 people in tailored suits laughing like they were watching a comedy show. Marcus Ellis, CIO of Ellis Aerospace and Defense, the first black leader in the company's history, said nothing. His hands rested on the table, lean but firm fingers, tapping a steady rhythm like the ticking of a countdown clock. Behind designer sunglasses, Robert Whitman, chairman of the board, the man who once bragged, "We built this empire with white blood, and other people's sweat was savoring the moment." Beside him, Stephen Crowley, the CFO, smirked. "Told you, a kid from public housing was never cut out to lead national defense." Jason Whitman, Robert's son, lifted his phone, the LED light gleaming. "The live stream's up, Dad," he said excitedly. Viewers are climbing fast. Comments began flooding in. "Send him back where he belongs. Fake diversity hire. Hashtag fake black leader." The room filled with cruel laughter. Marcus remained silent. The afternoon light streamed through the glass, casting across his sun-warmed face, turning him into a still figure of calm amid a crowd of sneering shadows. "You don't get it, do you?" Marcus Robert leaned forward, his voice rumbling like thunder. "You're fired. Not temporarily, permanently." And he tossed a ring of keys onto the table. "This is your real office now, the restroom on the 3rd floor, 3rd stall from the left. You understand the word fired, don't you?" More laughter erupted. Elaine Porter, Chief Strategy Officer, tapped her red nails against the table, the rhythm deliberate like the judgment of a merciless judge. "We should record this meeting," she said coolly. "Shareholders will love to see us taking decisive action against fraud." Marcus lifted his head, locking eyes with Robert, steady and unflinching. "Interesting," he said evenly, almost softly. "You used to write speeches about innovation and diversity for the Pentagon. So this is what you meant." Silence, then louder laughter. "Don't get self-righteous," Crowley sneered. "He thinks a Harvard scholarship makes him one of us." Harris, the vice president of operations, leaned back in his chair, chuckling. "I remember seeing him washing dishes in the workers' cafeteria his first week here. Looked more natural that way." A soft buzz came from Marcus's phone. He glanced down. A number with the country code for Singapore. He calmly declined the call. Still pretending to be busy, Robert smirked. The man still believes he's real. Pathetic. The live stream hit 30,000 viewers. Employees were gathered outside, watching through the glass, whispering. Natalie Brooks, the vice president of operations, who had worked directly with Marcus for 3 years, bit her lip until it bled. She knew this was wrong, deeply wrong. "Call security," Robert ordered with a tilt of his chin. "Have him escorted out through the main lobby. I want everyone to see what happens when someone steps out of line." The doors swung open. 2 guards entered, led by Andre King, a tall, broad-shouldered black man and former Afghanistan veteran. His eyes swept the room, stopping on Marcus. Something made him hesitate. "You want me to remove Mr. Ellis?" Andre asked slowly. "You heard me," Robert barked. "He's terminated for fraud. Do it, or you can join him." Andre clenched his fists. He thought of his wife, his 2 young children, the mortgage still unpaid. Orders were orders. He stepped forward, his hand brushing the cuffs on his belt. "You should cooperate," Sir Andre said, quietly, almost apologetic. Marcus looked up, his voice soft as a whisper before a storm. "I understand, Andre. You're just doing your job." But there was something in his eyes, calm, burning certainty that made Andre take a half step back. There was no fear in Marcus's gaze, only unshakable resolve. Robert checked his watch and slammed his palm on the table. 5 minutes. I want that chair empty. Bring the boxes. His things will be inspected. I don't trust him not to steal something. An assistant wheeled in several empty cardboard boxes, the kind used for cafeteria pizza. The room broke into laughter again. "Perfect," Harris said. "Saves the company money." Marcus looked around from the mocking faces of the men who had once signed defense contracts with him to Jason Whitman's gleeful smirk behind the phone streaming live. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. A barely audible sigh escaped him. Then he opened them, unnervingly calm. "Robert," he said, his voice low but clear. "Do you know the most interesting thing about power?" Robert arched an eyebrow, mocking. "You're about to lose it and want to lecture me." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "No. I just wonder, when a man believes he holds all the cards, does he ever realize he's playing someone else's game?" No one understood what he meant, but something flickered across Andre's face, the sense that an invisible bullet had just been chambered. Outside, the sun dipped lower, flooding the glass walls with gold. The live stream hit 40,000 viewers. The comments kept pouring in, cruel and relentless. Robert leaned forward, his tone sharp. "It's over, Ellis. A kid from community college, pretending to be a genius, thinking he could sit at our table. Ridiculous." Marcus replied simply, "You're half right." Then, with a calm precision, he pressed a button on his phone. A short beep echoed through the room. 3 words left his lips, light as air, but cutting like a blade. "Execute Protocol 7. In that instant, the world seemed to stop. No one understood, not yet, until every phone on the table, Roberts, Crowley's, Harris's, Porter's, vibrated at once. Screens flashed. System alerts, international codes, internal emails, market warnings all hit simultaneously. The glow of the screens reflected on their faces, draining every hint of color. The once noisy room fell into a suffocating silence. The only sound left was the pounding of hearts. Marcus Ellis stood slowly straightening his tie. His eyes no longer belonged to a man being fired. They belonged to someone who had just flipped the game. A faint breeze drifted from the ceiling vent, sweeping away the scent of expensive cologne, replacing it with a cold, sterile chill, as if the entire room had been sealed by an unseen force. And at the center of that storm stood one man, unmoving, Marcus Ellis, the man who once had a janitor's uniform thrown in his face, now beginning to rewrite the very definition of power. The phones erupted, like a chorus of panic, their flashing screens lighting up with alerts one after another. SEC alert, Singapore Ministry of Defense, urgent contract update. Robert Whitman stared at his display, sweat breaking across his forehead. "What the hell is this?" he stammered. Marcus stood still, calm, as if he had scheduled this very moment. "I believe you just received a message from the Singapore Ministry of Defense," he said quietly, placing a sleek black briefcase on the table. "We have approximately 43 minutes left to sign an $800 million contract." "What?" Crowley barked, his voice sharp. "Who are you trying to scare?" Marcus opened the briefcase, each click slicing through the silence. Inside lay a gold-trimmed folder with a blazing red label, Singapore Defense Contract Classified. The reflection of the lights made the letters burn like fire. Robert lunged forward, but Marcus slid the file toward him. "Careful," he said. "That's the original. and only I'm authorized to sign it." "You're lying," Porter snapped. "An international deal requires the board's approval. Article 15, Section C." Marcus interrupted his tone, even but cutting. "The CEO holds exclusive signing authority for defense contracts exceeding $500 million for reasons of national security. That clause was added by you, Robert, in 2016 to keep power away from the former CEO. Ironic, isn't it?" The air thickened. Eyes darted between one another in disbelief. Outside the glass wall, Natalie Brooks covered her mouth. She understood exactly what this meant. Marcus wasn't just fighting, he was winning. Robert's trembling hands flipped through the documents. The numbers glared back at him. $800 million exclusive signatory. Marcus Ellis, expiration 43 minutes. Sweat dripped down his temple. "My God," he whispered. "Your stock price is down 18%, Marcus continued as if discussing the weather. "And when this contract expires, the company loses 34% of its annual revenue. I wonder what shareholders will say when they find out you destroyed it because of racism." Crowley slammed the table. "Don't pull that righteous act. You think you've won because of one contract. You're fired, remember?" Marcus gave a faint smile, eyes sharp as a blade. "Fired," he said softly. He pulled out another set of papers. "You sure about that? Because under Virginia law, a board meeting to dismiss a CEO requires 48 hours prior notice and a complete record." He turned a page. "Your notice was sent at 9:47 a.m., and this meeting started at 10:04. That's 17 minutes' notice." Elaine Porter's face went pale as she scrambled through her tablet. The timestamps confirmed every word. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Oh, it's very possible," Marcus replied, his tone low and steady, a hidden current running beneath it. "And when a meeting is invalid, my employment protection clause activates transferring 30% of the company's outstanding shares to me, making me the majority shareholder." 30%, Robert croaked. "That's right," Marcus said, his eyes sweeping the room. "Congratulations, everyone. You just fired the controlling shareholder of the company." Dead silence filled the air. Jason Whitman was still live streaming, but his hand shook so violently the camera trembled. Comments flooded in. "He planned this from the start. Hashtag Protocol 7 is real. The black CEO just took down the system." Robert grabbed his phone and shouted into the speaker, "I want legal in here now. Immediately, no need," Marcus said, calmly, pressing a button on his phone. "Jennifer, confirm filing status." A composed female voice echoed from the speaker. "Confirmed, Mr. Ellis. The filings have been submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission and all shareholders. You are now the largest individual shareholder of Ellis Aerospace and Defense." The silence that followed crashed like a wave. Robert stumbled, grabbing the back of a chair for support. Porter's mouth hung open. Crowley muttered, "Dear God, the SEC!" Marcus snapped the briefcase shut. "God's not involved here, Stephen," he said evenly. "This is law and mathematics." Andre King still stood by the door, his hand on the metal cuffs that now felt impossibly heavy. He looked at Marcus differently now, with respect. Marcus turned back to Robert, meeting his eyes. 40 minutes ago you thought I was a joke. Now you're broadcasting your own collapse live. Isn't that poetic? You set us up?" Robert rasped. "No," Marcus replied. "You set yourselves up." Outside the glass, dozens of employees gathered, their faces stunned. They didn't dare speak, but everyone understood the balance of power had shifted. Natalie Brooks checked her phone. Social media was exploding. The hashtag Protocol 7 had climbed to #1 nationwide. CNN, Bloomberg, even the BBC were breaking the story. News vans were pulling up outside. One headline dominated every feed: Black CEO takes down racist board live. Robert leapt up, shouting, "You can't sign that contract. You're removed." Marcus looked up, his eyes glowing with conviction. "I am still the lawful CEO, and only I can sign." A soft chime from the elevator interrupted him. 3 people in navy suits stepped in, led by a tall Asian woman with sharp features. "Mr. Ellis," she said, in crisp British English, Defence Minister Lee Wei of Singapore has arrived. "The signing ceremony is ready. The press is assembled in the lobby. The minister here," Robert stammered. Marcus smiled, adjusting his tie. "Right on time. The Singaporeans value punctuality." The murmurs in the hallway swelled. Crowley glanced at his phone, his voice trembling. "The stock just bounced back 8%. They think you saved the deal." Marcus stepped forward, calm and commanding, like a king reclaiming his throne. He placed a Mont Blanc pen in the center of the table. "You can call it luck," he said. "I call it preparation." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across every pale face. "For 3 years I prepared for the day you'd choose hate over partnership. And today, that day arrived." Andre King, the man who had once been ready to handcuff him, nodded firmly. "Mr. Ellis," he said, with quiet strength, "if you need anyone escorted out of the building, just say the word." Silence hung for a beat. Then slowly, Robert sank back into his chair. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by emptiness. Marcus turned toward the window, looking down at the city below. The afternoon light gleamed across his face, glowing like molten steel. "You asked me earlier what power is," he said, turning back to Robert. "It's the ability to make someone realize too late that everything they thought they controlled never belonged to them." Outside news helicopters thundered overhead. In that room, heavy with defeat, Marcus Ellis stood tall, a steel monument in the storm. And in that moment, everyone knew the game was over. But the real war had just begun. The air in the conference room was dense, like smoke. Everyone sat still, listening to the wall clock tick each beat, counting down to judgment. Outside, the thrum of news helicopters bled through the glass, blending with loudspeakers from networks blasting a breaking headline about a corporate coup in the heart of Arlington. Marcus Ellis stood at the center of the table, one hand resting on the still-locked black briefcase, the warm light above tracing the veins along his wrist, each pulse a mix of anger and composure. "I have been silent long enough," he said, his voice, even low, decisive. "There are things where silence is complicity." Crowley shot to his feet. "Spare me the sermon, you think, because of that contract," that Marcus turned the key. "Not just the contract," he replied. The lid lifted each click, sharp and dry, echoing through the room. Inside, files were arranged with neat, colored tabs. Crowley Financial Crimes, Porter, Hate Speech, Harris Procurement, Fraud, Whitman Racketeering. Each binder was thick with hard edges and sealed with the authentication stamp of Hamilton and Brooks LLP. "My God!" Porter stepped back. "What are you doing?" Marcus looked at her, a gaze so cold it stopped her breath. What the board should have done long ago, protecting this company from the very people sitting in this room. He pulled the first file and opened it. "Stephen Crowley," he read email dated the 15th of March last year. "Sent from your personal account to your brother-in-law's company. Process a consulting fee of $50,000 for a non-existent project, and remember to remind Ellis of his place." He laid a printed transfer on the table. "Beneficiary Crowley, Family Consulting LLC, a shell company with no employees and no operations. That is financial fraud. Stephen minimum 5 years in federal prison. Crowley blanched fingers, digging into the chair, sweat pouring. That is not you, Marcus cut in. The independent auditor verified the sending IP and the bank account. Do not waste your breath. He closed the file and let it fall lightly to the table. He opened the second. Elaine Porter, the 3rd of April, last year, 2:47 in the afternoon. A recorded call between you and your daughter. He tapped speaker. Elaine's shrill voice filled the room. Honey, I cannot let that man destroy the legacy your father built. They need to know their true place. Elaine broke into tears, hands shaking. You have no right to broadcast. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, Elaine Marcus replied. And ironically, this recording system was approved by this board to protect sensitive information. A thin smile, bitter and controlled. You made the noose yourselves and hung it right above your heads. Silence locked the room. Jason Whitman lowered his phone, the live stream still on the grin, gone his young face bloodless. Marcus opened the third file. Bradley Harris, Vice President of Operations. Text to your wife, the 22nd of May, at 11:33 at night. Cannot wait to see his face when he is kicked out. I have arranged contracts for the boys, profits up 40%. Harris shook his head hard. I was joking. It was a joke that paid you and your network more than $2 million in spread, Marcus said, cutting him off. That is bid rigging, that is fraud. You know that charge carries up to 10 years. Harris collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. No one spoke, only the ragged breathing of people, realizing for the first time that the prey had become the hunter. Marcus lifted the last file, black cover, silver trim label R, Whitman RICO conspiracy. He set it down and opened it with care. The 18th of June last year, 4:22 in the afternoon, a recording of a meeting in this room. Your words, Robert. I do not care how profitable or how smart he is. I will never let an arrogant black man run my company. I will destroy him, his reputation, his family, everything. The room froze. Robert trembled, reaching for a defense. That is fabricated fake. Marcus tilted his head. Who approved the installation of this room's recording system? Robert had no answer. Exactly, Marcus nodded. You called it counter-espionage security. I call it the truth stored for 36 months straight. Every email, every call, every text, every racist joke, every financial crime recorded, backed up and admissible in court. A ping chimed from Jason's phone. The screen flashed, Protocol 7, trending in 43 countries, more than 150,000 people watching. Robert slammed his palm on the table, voice raw. You are destroying this company. Marcus met his eyes blade sharp. No, Robert, I am saving it from you. He paced around the table. Each step measured his tone, dropping like a funeral drum. For 3 years I have been threatened or surveilled, treated with suspicion because of my skin. I stayed quiet, believing results would speak, but you only saw what you wanted. You planned to ruin me, to smear me. You even hired a private investigator to tail my family. He stopped. That investigator Marcus Delano is actually with the FBI, and every instruction you sent him is now in a federal case file. The room erupted in silent shock. Porter sobbed openly. Crowley whispered prayers. Harris stared at the tabletop, as if begging it to swallow him. Robert Whitman sat hollow, a man who had lost everything. Marcus closed the briefcase, his voice lower iron steady. I do not need revenge. I need justice, and justice begins with the truth. He looked to Andre King. Andre, do you still have the cuffs? Andre drew them out, the metal catching the light. Yes, sir. Marcus turned to Robert. "How do you feel about the press, seeing who actually deserves to be in cuffs today?" Robert stammered, "Marcus, I can explain. No need." Marcus said, final and clean, "I no longer care to hear apologies from people who fear losing their chair more than losing their soul." He turned toward the window. Outside, the last rays of afternoon pierced the clouds and washed the glass painting his face with a golden halo, the glow of truth laid bare. "I told you, Robert," he said slowly, "you cannot fire me from this company, because I never worked for you. I work for the people who believe justice and dignity are worth more than power." He allowed himself a small smile. "And you have just proved why Protocol 7 must exist." In the corridor beyond, the glass, employees began to applaud, not loud at first, but firm, one, then two, then the whole hallway rising in even claps that rolled through the walls like an oath to a new era. Marcus turned back. There were 30 minutes left before the contract expired. He snapped the briefcase shut, eyes unwavering. "Now," he said, "we will decide whether Ellis Aerospace becomes a symbol of justice or a warning about ignorance." No one answered, only the applause outside pounding through every corner of the room like a pledge to what comes next. The applause from the hallway echoed like war drums. Inside the cold glass room, Marcus Ellis stood facing 8 faces that once laughed at him. He was no longer the man being forced out of his seat. He was the one deciding their fate. Robert Whitman remained seated, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his face flushed with a mix of rage and fear. "What do you want, Marcus?" he demanded. "Money, power, or just a public spectacle of revenge?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, his voice calm to the point of being unnerving. "I do not want money," he said. "I want a choice, 2 paths, and you will choose today." He placed the briefcase on the table, opened it again, and pulled out a new file stamped in bold letters. "Choice 1, Choice 2. The light caught the inked words like blades carved in steel. "Choice number 1. Marcus began pacing slowly around the table, his voice steady and cold, but clear enough that every word sank deep. "I walk out of this building. I do not sign the Singapore contract. And exactly 25 minutes from now, the $800 million deal is cancelled. Tomorrow, every piece of evidence in this case, financial crimes, fraud, hate speech, RICO conspiracy will be sent simultaneously to the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, and the Department of Justice." He stopped behind Robert and rested his hand lightly on the back of his chair. "The company collapses overnight. Stock value drops by half. 3,000 employees lose their jobs, and the 8 of you in this room go to prison." Robert held his breath. Crowley gasped. Elaine Porter buried her face in her hands and sobbed. The only sound left was the cold hum of the air vent, sweeping through the silence like a verdict. Marcus moved to the head of the table, his voice dropping lower. "The second choice," he said. He opened the second file and pulled out a stack of papers. "Resign. Immediately. No lawsuits. No excuses. No blame. You sign these resignation letters, and I will sign the Singapore contract within 3 minutes before the deadline. The company keeps the deal, keeps its reputation, keeps 3,000 jobs. I keep my promise to the Ministry of Defense and our international partners." His gaze met each pair of eyes in turn. "That is what I call conditional mercy." Mercy Crowley let out a dry laugh that cracked halfway. "You are extorting us." Marcus answered, his tone quiet but thunderous. "No. This is law. This is ethics. This is your last chance to choose your own freedom." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "We will not sign. You cannot force us." Marcus paused for a few seconds, then lifted his phone and dialed. "Jennifer," he said, through speakerphone, "confirm if the files have been transmitted to the FBI." A calm female voice answered. "Awaiting your final command, Mr. Ellis. One signal and the entire dossier will auto-transfer to all 4 federal agencies. Protocol 7. Encryption is armed and ready." Marcus turned to Robert, his eyes unwavering. "One word, Robert. And it all ends. Not just for you, but for everyone." Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. Harris suddenly stood, his voice cracking. I have a family, Marcus. My wife has no idea about any of this. I will sign." The words hit like a blade through the silence. Porter choked out between tears. "I will too. I cannot lose everything." Crowley looked around, his eyes bloodshot. "Are you insane?" "We are the founding board. We cannot bow." Marcus cut in. "You can keep your head high in federal prison." Crowley went silent. The light from the window caught his face, revealing naked fear. Natalie Brooks entered, carrying a laptop displaying a countdown timer. 22 minutes left, Mr. Ellis." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, Natalie." He turned back to the board, his voice now steady and warm like a teacher addressing a defiant class. "I know you think I am taking revenge. But the truth is, I do not need to. You sentenced yourselves. I am only holding up a mirror." He slid out another document, the title printed at the top, the Ellis Reformation Plan. "If you sign, you also sign this reform charter. A new board structure, 7 members, at least 4 must be women or minorities. Recruitment through AI to remove bias. Compensation tied to equality performance. And any act of discrimination, termination on the spot." Porter's hands trembled as she scanned the page, tears falling onto the table. "You want to change everything." "No," Marcus said softly. "I want to fix everything you broke." Crowley clutched his head, muttering like a man losing his mind. "If we sign, you will stay silent." Marcus nodded. "All evidence will be sealed unless any of you violate the agreement. I do not need to destroy this company. I need it to be something people can trust again." A shrill ringtone cut through the air Robert's phone. He picked up. His assistant's frantic voice burst through. "Mr. Whitman, CNN and Fox News are in the lobby. They are asking if there is a leadership crisis." Everyone turned toward Marcus. He said softly, "That is right. The world is watching." Robert set the phone down, drained of all fight. He stared at the papers before him, the words, "Resignation effective," immediately seeming to dance in front of his eyes. Marcus crossed his arms, his tone calm but solid as steel. 18 minutes. Choose freedom or choose prison. The air froze. Crowley was the first to move. He grabbed a pen. "Damn it," he muttered and signed. Porter followed, tears streaking down her face. Harris signed without a word. Only Robert remained. He looked up, his voice hoarse. "You have won, Marcus." Marcus replied quietly. "No. We all win if you sign." Robert's gaze fell on the Mont Blanc pen at the center of the table. His hand trembled as he picked it up, scrawling his name, the signature uneven, like the final crack in a fallen empire. Marcus gathered the papers, placed them neatly into the briefcase, and locked it with a code. He looked to Andre King and gave an order as light as a breath. "Andre, escort them to human resources. They have exit paperwork to complete." Andre nodded, his deep voice steady but burning with pride. "Yes, Mr. Ellis." 4 men and 1 woman left the room, faces pale, not daring to look back. When the door closed, Marcus stood still for a long moment. He exhaled slowly. 3 years of anger, humiliation, and pressure dissolved in that single breath. Natalie looked at him, eyes glistening. "You are not angry at them." Marcus smiled, tired but kind. "What use is anger? What they needed was not my fury, but their own consequences." She nodded softly. 15 minutes left, she said. "Minister Li Wei is waiting downstairs." Marcus closed the briefcase, adjusted his jacket. "Then let's go," he said, his voice quiet, but heavy with resolve. "We have 15 minutes to save 3,000 jobs and a company that once deserves to be trusted." He left the room, walking through the sunlit hallway, where hundreds of employees stood, watching in silence, then erupted into applause as he passed. The sound was not for power, but for the truth reclaimed. Deep inside, Marcus knew the battle was not over, but a new foundation had just been laid, built on honor, on preparation, and on faith that justice, even when late, can still save an empire from collapse. The moment Marcus Ellis stepped out of the elevator, the grand lobby of Ellis Aerospace and Defense had become an impromptu stage. Light from the chandeliers flashed across the marble floor, where hundreds of employees stood in silent lines, their eyes following the man who only 1 hour earlier had been paraded as a failure. Now he was the center of every gaze, walking through a hush that sounded like respect. In the crowd, reporters pressed forward. Cameras craned high, flashes burst like lightning. Whispers blended awe with admiration. "Is that him, the CEO who was fired and now is leading an international signing?" Another voice exclaimed, "They are calling this the greatest corporate reversal in business history." Marcus said nothing. He simply walked steady and sure. Beside him, Natalie Brooks held the contract file, and Andre King followed quietly, his eyes set like a guardian at the gate of justice. Ahead, near the main entrance, a line of people in navy suits waited. At the front stood a composed, imposing Asian gentleman, Singapore's Minister of Defense, Li Wei. As Marcus approached, Li Wei smiled and extended his hand. "Mr. Ellis, we heard there was a little disturbance in your boardroom." Marcus clasped his hand, gaze direct. "Just a bit of house cleaning, Minister. Thank you for your patience." Li Wei's smile deepened his voice, low and precise, the tone of a man accustomed to moving the world with words. "In Singapore, we value punctuality. More importantly, we value honor. You kept your word that is worthy of respect." The words drew a slight bow from Marcus, pride easing into relief. "Honor," he answered, "is the one thing I will never trade." A reporter pressed in, excitement spilling into his voice. "Mr. Ellis, can you tell us what really happened on the 48th floor?" Marcus glanced at the lens, his voice even and clear. The truth was brought to light, and when truth speaks, darkness retreats. He smiled. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a nation to partner with." Applause cracked like thunder. Photographers hammered their shutters, a storm of light. Li Wei set a hand on Marcus's shoulder and guided him to the signing table, prepared in the center of the lobby, draped in white, flanked by both national flags, and a placard reading, "Strategic Defense Partnership Singapore x Ellis Aerospace." The room fell still. Live cameras from CNN, BBC, and Channel News Asia fixed every lens on them. Natalie opened the file and set a Mont Blanc pen at the signature line. Marcus drew a breath. In his mind, the last hour unspooled the mocking laughter, the contemptuous stares, the threats, the years he had quietly built. Protocol 7, line by line of data, piece by piece of evidence. Now there was only a single stroke of ink. He lowered the pen. His signature ran strong and final across the page. Marcus Ellis, Chief Executive Officer. The scrape of the nib sounded like a blade, cutting the past, ending every injustice and opening a new era. Applause exploded. Li Wei signed next, then shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Congratulations, Mr. Ellis. The $800 million agreement is now in force." "Thank you," Minister Marcus said, his voice low but powerful. "This is not just a contract. It is a commitment to values and to trust." Behind them, Andre King stood still, eyes shining. He had never imagined he would witness a day when a black man was applauded by the world in the defense industry, a space long shadowed by bias. The media feeds surged. A live banner blazed. Black CEO signs. $800 million defense deal after exposing corrupt board Liv. Within 10 minutes, the Protocol 7 hashtag surpassed every social trend, hitting 1 million mentions on Twitter alone. A Reuters reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Ellis, what helped you stay calm while being humiliated like that?" Marcus looked straight into the camera, his smile light but deep. "When you know you hold the truth, you do not need to shout. The truth will carry its own volume." Employees along both corridors broke into rolling applause. A few wiped tears away. They were not clapping for a contract, but for the man himself who had stood without lowering anyone else, who turned humiliation into victory. Natalie Brooks leaned in and murmured, "You achieved what no one dared to imagine." Marcus looked around the lobby at the hundreds of eyes on him. "No," he said, "we achieved it. This company deserves to be saved because of people like them." He lifted a hand. "I know today looked outrageous. Remember this, no one can take your dignity unless you surrender it." Applause surged again. Janitors, engineers, analysts, once dismissed as invisible cogs, now shouted his name. Li Wei watched, smiling. "Mr. Ellis," he said, "where I come from, real leaders make others stand taller, not bow lower." Marcus dipped his head. "And I believe any company that forgets, that will fall." A microphone cracked to life. The press jostled for position. Natalie whispered, "Share price up 23% in 15 minutes. The market is electrified." Marcus glanced up at the giant screen, where Ellis Aerospace's chart was climbing like a cliff face. A small smile passed. "That is the easy part," he said. "The hard part is making the company worthy of that price." The ceremony ended, but the crowd held fast. A CNN reporter called out, "Mr. Ellis, what exactly is Protocol 7? Marcus paused at the lens, a cool light in his eyes. "Preparation for an unfair world, discipline when others choose fear, and a plan for those who understand that silence is not weakness, it is strategy." The lobby fell still. Then someone clapped, another joined. Within seconds the sound rolled across stone and glass like surf. Marcus turned to Li Wei. "Minister, let us make this deal a proof that ethics and profit can walk side by side." "And make the world learn from it," Li Wei replied. Cameras framed Marcus's face, calm and grounded, his eyes lit with iron belief. Beyond the frame, thousands were watching live around the world, feeling a rare instant when justice was not just spoken, but signed, sealed and recorded into history. As the signing concluded, Marcus turned from the table and looked once more across the lobby. He saw eyes bright with hope, smiles finally free of fear. In that moment, he understood this was not simply a victory for a black man in a suit. It was a victory for dignity, for intellect, and for preparation that held fast through the storm. He gripped the contract case and moved through the forest of cameras and lights, each step an affirmation that a new era had just been signed into being in ink in truth, and in the resolve of a man who believes that justice, when prepared well, will always prevail. 2 days after the signing ceremony, the headquarters of Ellis Aerospace and Defense felt different. The cold tension that once haunted its power filled corridors where mocking laughter echoed and decisions were signed on the backs of others was gone. In its place was the rhythm of real people, employees walking with their heads held high and eyes lit with a confidence they thought they had lost. On the 48th floor, the battlefield was now open to light. The polished wooden table where Robert Whitman had once thrown a janitor's uniform was spotless. On it stood a small brass plaque that read, "The Protocol 7 Room," in memory of what was wrong, in honor of what became right. Marcus Ellis stood there, gazing around the room, now glowing in morning light. Every moment returned to him, every word, every contemptuous glance, every second he had held back. Now all of it had turned into the energy that allowed him to rewrite the rules. Natalie Brooks entered, carrying a thick binder. "First reform report, Mr. Ellis." Marcus nodded, taking it. "Thank you, Natalie. Today we are not just clearing the ashes, we are planting a forest." The new initiative was titled Project Equity. Every rule, every policy rewritten from scratch. The new board consisted of 7 members, 4 women and 3 men, representing diverse fields: engineering ethics, human rights, and defense security. Sarah Lane, the former operations director, became the new chairwoman. She was white, but Marcus trusted her completely. Not because of her color, he had said, but because of her loyalty to truth. At the first company-wide meeting, Marcus stood in the center of the vast hall, light casting across his face. Hundreds filled the seats, silent and waiting. The whispers of doubt were gone, replaced by anticipation for a new beginning. Marcus began. 3 days ago, I almost lost everything: my job, my reputation, even my faith in justice. But if I had lost my composure that day, none of us would be here now. Remember, this calmness is not weakness. It is the highest form of control. He paused, sweeping his eyes across the audience. From today, Ellis Aerospace and Defense will not only manufacture defense technology, we will manufacture trust. Trust that fairness is not a slogan, but a foundation. The hall rose to its feet in applause. Some wiped tears. To them it was not just a speech, but proof that good people could win, and win with dignity. When the crowd dispersed, Marcus returned to the table with his new team. Sarah Lane started the presentation. We have received over 2,000 job applications in 48 hours. Many who left because of discrimination now want to return. Andre King, now head of security and integrity, added, I have deployed the WhistleSafe system, an anonymous reporting line linked directly to an independent audit firm. No one will ever silence an employee's voice again. Marcus smiled. Good. Now let's talk about the harder part, culture. He wrote 2 words on the whiteboard: dignity first. We will embed human dignity into every process. From recruitment to promotion, every decision must be transparent, measurable, and fair. The AI system will evaluate performance, not names, gender, or background, Natalie asked. And what about the old board? Mr. Ellis Marcus went quiet for a moment. They will face the law, but we will not build the future out of resentment. I want everyone to look forward. Outside news was spreading faster than any missile the company ever built. The international press called him the man who rewired corporate power. Harvard Business Review ran an article titled Protocol 7, A New Standard for Corporate Justice. Fortune 500 companies began reaching out to study the Ellis standard. That afternoon, Marcus sat in his new office, the window opened to the Potomac River, the breeze lifting the curtains. The phone rang. The caller ID read, Lee Wei, Singapore Defense. "Good afternoon, Minister Marcus said. Lee Wei's warm voice came through. "Mr. Ellis, we just received the first performance report. Your company operates like a military unit. We are pleased we chose correctly." "Thank you, Minister. But I want to prove that ethics can also be profitable." "You are proving that already," Lee Wei said. "We are preparing to expand our partnership with the Southeast Asia Defense Alliance. The projected figure is $4 billion over the next 5 years. Marcus smiled, his eyes drifting toward the horizon. "I only hope that means thousands of jobs created, not thousands lost." "The world needs leaders like you," Lee Wei said, before hanging up. Marcus leaned back, exhaling deeply. His mind drifted to the years before, the nights in a small apartment, working until dawn, enduring the skeptical looks for being a black man in a white, dominated defense industry. Every silent moment, every note, every file of evidence, all of it had become the force that made the world finally listen. Natalie knocked and entered holding a newspaper. "You should see this," she said. The front page of the Washington Post read, "From janitor's uniform to global leadership, the Ellis Revolution." He read it quietly, not out of pride, but from a strange realization his story no longer belonged to him. It had become a symbol for millions who had been pushed aside. That night when the office was empty, Marcus stood alone in the Protocol 7 room. The soft light reflected off the engraved plaque. He reached out and touched it gently, whispering, "Everything began with humiliation, but it will end with dignity." At the doorway, Andre appeared, his voice rough. "Sir, the FB. I just confirmed the formal investigation into Whitman, and the old group has begun." Marcus nodded, his tone calm without triumph. "Let justice handle the rest. We have work to do." Andre smiled. "I have never seen anyone turn failure into a weapon like you." Marcus looked out toward the city, Arlington glowing with lights. "It is not a weapon, Andre. It is a lesson. When you are pushed to the wall, you have 2 choices, bow your head or build a door." He turned his eyes, shining with resolve. "And we, Andre, chose the door." Outside, night fell. But inside the Ellis building, the lights still burned, the light of justice, of trust, and of a new beginning, written by the hands of those who were once forced to kneel. 3 months after the Singapore contract was signed, Ellis Aerospace and Defense had transformed beyond recognition. The once empty halls now echoed with laughter. Bulletin boards were filled with photos of new employees, faces from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe, all gathered for one purpose: to redefine what a defense company means in an age of ethics and equality. The main building was flooded with natural light. The Protocol 7 room had become a daily destination for international delegations from top business schools to government agencies. They came not only to learn how Ellis operated, but to witness a leadership model that turned fairness into an actual technology. That morning, Marcus Ellis opened an internal meeting. Sarah Lane, now the new chairwoman of the board, reported. In the first quarter, loan revenue increased 26%. But what I am proudest of is that our employee satisfaction index has risen by over 300%. Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus nodded. "Encouraging numbers," he said. "But I want something deeper than numbers. Trust. Do people feel like they belong here?" The question silenced the room. Then a young Indian engineer raised her hand, her voice trembling. I used to think about leaving this industry because of discrimination, but now every morning I come to work I feel heard. Marcus smiled, genuine and warm. That, he said, is the real revenue. After the meeting, Natalie Brooks approached with a folder. You have an interview with Harvard Business Review today. They want to feature the Protocol 7 framework. Harvard Marcus chuckled. I used to be the scholarship kid they let in for diversity. Now I suppose they're studying their own lesson. Natalie smiled but kept her tone serious. They want to focus on your personal role in the entire strategy. Should I prepare answers? Marcus shook his head. No need. The truth is simple. I only did what everyone should prepare for the day. Justice needs a plan. When the interview began, James Carter, the silver-haired journalist from Harvard Business Review, asked directly Mr. Ellis what kept you from collapsing. In the moment you were betrayed by your own board, Marcus met his gaze, his voice calm and deep. Because I never saw it as betrayal. I saw it as a test. They didn't take my power. They just showed me how strong I had to be to protect my dignity. Carter scribbled quickly, then asked, Do you think Protocol 7 is a model other companies can apply? Marcus leaned back, eyes steady like still water. Protocol 7 isn't software. It's a mindset. Prepare for the worst by living by the best. If justice doesn't exist in the system program, it into the people. That quote appeared word for word on the cover of the magazine a month later beneath a photo of Marcus standing before the plaque in the Protocol 7 room. The headline read, The CEO Who Engineered Justice. At the same time, major corporations began adopting the Ellis standard. Apple Defense Division, North Star Technologies, and even Lockwell, the competitor that once dismissed him, all announced internal reforms for transparency and fairness. One late evening, as Marcus remained in his office with the lights of Arlington glowing through the glass, Natalie entered, holding a laptop. You should see this, she said softly. On the screen was a live television interview. A middle-aged man with silver hair and a lined face spoke, I am Jason Whitman. My father, Robert Whitman, was the former chairman of Ellis Aerospace. I watched him fall, and I want to say, Marcus Ellis didn't just save the company, he saved me. Marcus froze. Jason continued, his voice breaking. After everything ended, I left the US and joined a non-profit for corporate equality. I realized some mistakes can only be corrected by standing up with the truth. And I will spend the rest of my life spreading that message. Natalie looked at Marcus. You made the son of the man who humiliated you into someone who carries your message of justice. Not everyone could do that. Marcus exhaled. I never wanted him to repay me. I just wanted to show the world that hatred never builds anything. At that moment, a breaking news alert flashed. Ellis Aerospace wins Southeast Asia Defense Alliance contract worth $4.2 billion. Natalie beamed. See, trust brings the real profit. Marcus gazed out the window at the Potomac River, shimmering under city lights. Profit is the result, he said quietly. Trust is the goal. The next day, Marcus attended the Global Leadership Summit in Geneva. The hall was packed with world-renowned CEOs ministers and scholars. When he took the stage, flashes erupted across the room. He didn't read a speech. He spoke as though to each person individually. 3 years ago, someone threw a janitor's uniform in my face. Today I carry that uniform in my briefcase, not for revenge, but to remind myself that any system, no matter how great, can fall into darkness if it forgets that people are its center. The hall fell silent, then erupted into prolonged applause. Afterward, Minister Li Wei approached, shaking his hand firmly. "Mr. Ellis, I believe you haven't just signed a defense contract, you've resigned the bond between ethics and power." Marcus smiled. "I only did what everyone should choose, fairness before profit." When he returned to the US, thousands of emails flooded in. People wrote that they had found the courage to speak up, to stand to change. The hashtag Protocol 7 Mindset spread globally, not just as the story of a CEO, but as a symbol for everyone who had ever been overlooked. That night, Marcus returned to his small apartment in Roslyn. He made a cup of coffee and sat by the window watching the city lights shimmer over the river. On the table lay the old janitor's uniform, neatly folded. He touched it gently and whispered, "I keep you not out of resentment, but gratitude, because you remind me that everyone deserves the chance to stand again." His phone buzzed a message from Sarah Lane. "BBC just named you Global Influencer of the Year. They want to interview you tomorrow morning." Marcus replied simply, "I don't want to talk about me. Let's talk about the system that changed." He set the phone down and leaned back, a soft smile on his lips. Outside, the Potomac flowed beneath the night sky, its rippling lights like the passage of time itself. And somewhere in that city, people who once lived in fear were finding their voices again, inspired by a man who had once been forced into silence, but chose to speak the truth, not through anger, but through preparation and faith. 2 years after the Singapore contract, the headquarters of Ellis Aerospace and Defense glowed like a lighthouse on the banks of the Potomac. The illuminated words on its rooftop, "Integrity, Innovation, Humanity," had become a case study in business schools around the world, a symbol of a new era of leadership, where profit could no longer be separated from ethics. In the top floor office, Marcus Ellis stood gazing out at the city. The first winter sunlight streamed through the glass, gleaming on the coffee cup in his hand. Below, hundreds of employees moved in and out of the new research complex, the R&D Center, named the Dignity Lab, where artificial intelligence and corporate ethics were developed side by side. Natalie Brooks entered with a stack of reports. "You'll want to see this," she said. Forbes just released their list. Ellis Aerospace is officially the most desired company to work for in the defense industry. "And you?" Marcus smiled, cutting her off gently. "I'm on the cover again, I suppose?" Natalie nodded, setting the magazine on the table. On the cover was a photo of him shaking hands with Sarah Lane during the anniversary ceremony of the Protocol 7 room. The headline read, "Marcus Ellis, the man who reprogrammed power." Marcus looked at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I've never liked that word, power. It makes people forget that true power is the ability to make others believe in what is good." Natalie smiled back. "Maybe that's why they fear it, because you use it the right way." The phone rang. Sarah Lane's voice came through the speaker. "Marcus, we have a virtual call with the Southeast Asia Defense Alliance. They want to discuss renewing the next 5-year contract." Marcus replied, "Set it up, Sarah, and bring in the project equity team. I want them to see that we're not just signing a contract, we're reinforcing trust between nations." When the large screen came on, the familiar face of Minister Li Wei appeared smiling warmly. "Mr. Ellis," he said, "over the past 2 years, our collaboration has not only succeeded technically, but has also inspired corporate governance in many countries. You have proven that ethics is the most sustainable technology." Marcus answered, his tone calm and grounded. "Thank you, Minister. But I didn't do it alone. Ellis Aerospace is only strong because every one of us is heard." Li Wei nodded. "And because of that, we are expanding the contract to $6.4 billion for the next phase. Singapore, Malaysia, and South Korea will co-sign." The room erupted in applause. Natalie said softly, moved, "You see, when justice becomes a process, it creates the future." After the meeting, Marcus walked through the corridor. Employees lined both sides, congratulating him. He stopped before a framed photograph on the wall, a shot of him with the legal team, the day he had said the words, "Execute Protocol 7." His eyes in the photo were calm, but behind them was the storm that had rewritten the company's history. Andre King, now the Global Director of Integrity, approached. "I just received confirmation from the FBI. The case against Robert Whitman and the old group is closed. They were sentenced from 10 to 20 years. Whitman is now working as a librarian in federal prison." Marcus nodded. The world has its own way of teaching justice. After a pause, he added, "Andre, I don't want their names mentioned in company training. Instead of telling their crimes, tell how we stood up." Andre smiled with respect. "You're right. Real strength is knowing where to end hatred." The next day, Marcus was invited to speak at Harvard Business School's graduation, the very place that once gave a scholarship to the young black student dismissed as a diversity token. When he walked onto the stage, thousands of graduates stood and applauded. His voice resonated low and steady. "I stand here today, not as a CEO, but as a man who was once thrown out of a boardroom because of his skin color. I don't say this to reopen wounds, but to remind you that when the world is unfair, prepare, don't hate. Let your preparation be stronger than their prejudice." The hall went silent, then rose in thunderous applause. In the front row, James Carter, the journalist who once interviewed him, quietly removed his glasses, eyes glistening with belief. That night back home, Marcus opened his laptop. His inbox overflowed with hundreds of emails from around the world. A brown-skinned woman from Johannesburg wrote, "I used Protocol 7 to document my boss's misconduct. Now I've been promoted to department head. Thank you for teaching me that preparation isn't weakness." A young engineer from Munich wrote, "We just implemented the Ellis standard at our startup. For the first time, everyone feels it's fair." Marcus read each message, his lips trembling slightly. He couldn't tell when these stories had become the most meaningful part of his day. Not because of fame, but because they reminded him that the true victory was not in the boardroom, but in the human heart. Late that night, he went down to the lobby. The dim light fell across a newly unveiled bronze statue, a man standing tall holding a briefcase, eyes fixed forward. At its base, the inscription read, "Justice is not a reaction. It's an architecture." Marcus stood silently for a long time. He remembered that day the smell of leather from his black briefcase, Andre's steady gaze, Natalie's trembling voice, Whitman's bitter laugh. It all felt distant, yet still present in every stone, every person now walking these halls with faith in a fairer world. Sarah Lane appeared holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're still here?" Marcus smiled, "Just thinking what this company will be like when I'm gone." Sarah sat beside him. "You can't leave, Marcus. Ellis Aerospace is you." He shook his head softly. "No, Sarah. Ellis Aerospace is all of us, the ones who were once silenced and now dare to speak, to act, to believe." They sat quietly, listening to the wind brushing against the glass. Sarah looked up at the golden plaque above the lobby, the words glowing softly. In memory of what was wrong, in honor of what became right. You know, she said gently, I think your real legacy isn't Protocol 7. It's the belief that ethics can be programmed into every system. Marcus looked at her, then out at the night sky. Maybe you're right, he said. Because when ethics becomes part of the structure, justice no longer needs guardians. It sustains itself. Outside the Potomac kept flowing, reflecting the light of the Ellis building, a sleepless beacon of a new culture. And in Marcus Ellis's heart, he knew he hadn't just changed a company. He had changed how the world defined power, that true power is not to rule, but to serve. Somewhere out there, among millions, still working late into the night, someone was already writing the first lines of Protocol 8, the next step in the journey he had begun. 3 years later, Marcus Ellis stepped down as CEO in a ceremony without fireworks, only the soft glow of golden lights falling across his face. Thousands of employees gathered in the Protocol 7 atrium, silent as he walked to the podium. I'm not leaving because the mission is over, he said, his voice deep and warm. I'm leaving because this mission now belongs to all of you. The air was thick with emotion. Sarah Lane embraced him, her voice trembling. Andre King stood at attention, saluting him in military fashion, his eyes wet but resolute. The applause that followed wasn't loud or frenzied. It was steady deep, like 1,000 hearts beating in rhythm. Marcus looked around, his gaze resting on the old bronze plaque. Keep building systems that make justice no longer need heroes, he said. Because the day we no longer need people like Marcus Ellis, that will be the true victory. As he stepped out of the building, the morning light spread across the Potomac River. Behind him, the Ellis Tower blazed brightly, its reflection rippling on the water like a symbol of a new kind of power, the kind born when one person stands tall and teaches an entire system to change. Marcus smiled. He no longer needed a business card, because his name had become something greater, the embodiment of preparation that speaks through justice. 1 year after Marcus Ellis stepped down from leadership, the business world still spoke of him as a living legend. At Harvard, students studied Case Study Protocol 7 as if reading a declaration. At the United Nations, the phrase Ellis Standard had become the global benchmark for corporate ethics. But Marcus chose silence. He lived simply in a small house by the river, writing books, teaching and mentoring young leaders about what he called the science of integrity. One afternoon, Natalie Brooks came to visit, her voice filled with emotion. The flame you lit has never gone out, she said. Corporations everywhere are replicating your model. And whenever people ask who was the first to turn justice into strategy, they all say your name, Marcus Ellis. He only smiled, his gaze drifting toward the shimmering water. If they still remember justice, he said softly, then it's all right if they forget me. That evening, the crimson sunset reflected over the Potomac, mirroring the silhouette of the man who had changed the world's understanding of power. And in the wind, his words seemed to echo. Justice is not the shout of the strong, but the quiet act of the right. That flame passed from the hands of Marcus Ellis, continued to spread, not with noise, not needing a name, but enough to light an entire generation that now believes preparation, dignity, and faith can change the world. From the perspective of a scholar in leadership and ethics, the story of Marcus Ellis is not merely a journey of overturning power, but a testament to the enduring strength of principled preparation. In a world where noise often drowns out reason, he proved that those who remain calm, steadfast, and strategic are the ones who ultimately prevail. If you believe that true justice begins with preparation, hit like to share this message and subscribe to join us in exploring more stories where ethics is not a weakness, but the foundation of real power. Leave a comment with a phrase that reflects your belief, a reminder for all of us. Keep your dignity.